I'm delighted now to bring you the first of our Jazz by Request sessions, where we're going to meet the award-winning jazz singer and lyricist Georgia Mancio, who celebrates 20 years of being in the music business.
I passed by the house just today. It seemed to have something to say. The gates were gone.
Georgia, welcome to Ultimate Stream Live.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I know where I am, but I'm with you virtually.
When did you start singing and professionally, and which artists did you enjoy, and which artists inspired you?
Well, I started by default because it was something I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. I'd listened to quite a lot of jazz when I was a kid. My dad had brought home some records, and I always loved those old movies with all the classic, standards. Obviously, I didn't know they were standards, but I just didn't have the confidence. So I ended up studying filmmaking, and it was a part-time course. And while I was studying, I was waitressing at the very famous jazz club Ronnie Scott's in London.
Where I think you've performed several times there.
Yes, which was amazing to go from one to the other. But when I was working there, I think as much as seeing, incredible legends, people like Betty Carter and Elvin Jones, it was actually a lot to do with meeting musicians on the scene in the UK, and just kind of demystifying this notion that, well, it also is a job. It's an amazing privilege to make art and to be a creative in a creative industry, but it is also a job. And just meeting a couple of people who really helped me, put some demos together and just start learning songs and get on with some sense of it. That kind of just unlocked the key, really, that I was missing. So I decided to just give music a go and see what happened. And
okay.
The first time and last time I made a plan, and one thing led to another, and eventually I was lucky enough to go professional.
I think we've got a photo here. I think you waitressed at Ronnie's for about 5 years. We've got a photo here of you with, I think, George Melly at your leaving party.
It was my leaving party, so it was probably about 5, 6 in the morning by then. And it was Christmas Eve 1999, because I had decided that I wouldn't start the millennium. I wanted to start the millennium as a professional singer, because it just felt like a nice, neat, year to make a fresh start. So
what a great way of getting introduced to music and meeting a lot of jazz artists,
and just everything about the stagecraft and seeing the human, I think, behind the scenes. That was really important, to not just be too distanced, I think, from seeing a performer, but understanding them as rounded human beings. I think that's really key to getting into the soul of somebody's music, actually.
Tell me about some of the artists that you've collaborated with over the years.
For me, everything comes from playing with somebody and listening to them, and playing with people who are of a level that's much higher than yours. You can't help but learn. And I found musicians that are incredibly generous and share their knowledge, and very, very rarely judgmental of someone starting out. So first people I kind of collaborated with, somebody like Andrew Klinder, bass player, who has become a great friend and also my producer. He's produced 3 of my albums, and he's working on a 4th. Actually, I think he's produced 5, but I've lost track. But he produced Songbook and Finding Home, my last 2. And then I very luckily have had a long collaboration with great vocalist Ian Shaw, who's also a good friend. And that's another thing entirely, I think, singing with another singer, a great singer. And you just get a different insight, I think, into what you could do with your own instrument. And then have had a long collaboration with Nigel Price, guitarist Nigel Price. We did an album in 2013 with wonderful bass player Judy Walkington. And then in the last few years, I've had two really important collaborations with pianists and composers, Alan Broadbent, and then most recently Kate Williams. And a project that I'm working on that's sort of a slow burn is with a great pianist and another songwriter, Tom Corley. So
great.
Brought something very different, I think.
You recorded one of my favourite albums, Songbook, with Alan Broadbent. I mean, your partnership's been called one of the most formidable songwriting partnerships of the 21st century. How did the two of you meet?
I had missed him. He'd come to London, or he'd come to the UK and played a couple of shows. So Andy gave me his email address and said, well, why don't you just get in touch, and maybe the next time he comes to the UK, you might be able to do something and do a gig together.
Nothing is so black and white if I think of you.
Did more than a gig together, didn't you?
We did. Yeah. I mean, it's quite a story, really, because I first listened to him when I worked at Ronnie's. So it was quite a full circle to then end up headlining Ronnie's with him for our album launch. But so we kept in touch. We were trying to see if there was some way of doing a gig together, which eventually happened in 2013. We did just a couple of duo gigs. And then the next year, we were planning to do some more, and I just asked him if he had any other original songs, because we'd played a song of his that he'd had lyrics written to by Dave Frischberg, something he'd arranged later on for Sheila Jordan, and it was a beautiful tune. So I asked him, do you have any other originals that maybe I can learn for the next gigs? And in response to that, he sent me a song called The Long Goodbye, and said, actually, I've always imagined that this would sound great with lyrics, and if you fancy giving it a go, then give it a go. So I did, and he was pleased with it. We changed a couple of things here and there, and then very organically from that point on, he just kept sending me tunes.
It was called something else originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was called The Long Goodbye, and we changed it to The Last Goodbye.
Okay. So where do you get your inspiration from when you're writing lyrics?
Really, I'd say firstly from the music, because someone like Alan, to me, writes such. There's so much story in his writing. There's already a story there. I always feel like I know that there's something happening, and I have to just find the way to access what that story is and put it into words. So I don't actually overthink too much when I'm writing for Alan, because it takes away that natural, organic connection. And if I've
so it comes quite naturally to you.
It can do, but what happened is that we got into a flow, and it was just a really good time, maybe for both of us, to be thinking about, well, what do we want to present here? And once we got into writing a few, we then thought they need to have something that ties them together, some themes, and some way of putting them into a set, which then became the album Songbook.
So jazz festivals have been quite a big part of your life over the last few years with Reavoice and Hang. Tell us a little bit about those.
So I started the first Reavoice in 2010, which is astonishing, really. And it was sparked by a bit of frustration, actually, of having seen some vocal artists, maybe years before, maybe more recently, that I had loved, and was puzzled why they never seemed to come to the UK. They would tour, Europe. Say if they were, American artists, they would come and tour Europe, but they would never seem to include the UK. And I just thought it would be a nice thing to try and bring some of them over, and so that's really where it started. As the sort of years went on, it became, I think, just a wonderful way of celebrating the art of vocal jazz, and it made me really think much more creatively about who inspires me, and who inspires other people, and to try and get as broad a palette as possible, you know, of different artists, from someone like, you know, Italian Maria Pia De Vito to Carleen Anderson to Claire Martin, Christine Tobin, Carmen Souza, and very famously Gregory Porter, who did my second and third Reavoice festivals so that'd be 2011 and 2012. Okay. And that helped kind of put it on the map, actually, because he was just taking off. So it was a fantastic bit of timing, really. Luck and timing.
Would I be right in thinking that I saw you at Reavoice at the 606 Club one year?
Yeah, that was actually the very last edition and the last night of the last edition. So that was 2014. And I decided to just branch out from London and branch out from just the Peach Express Jazz Club, which is where we've done most of the shows. We did also a couple at the Union Chapel. So in 2014, there were 4 venues, 2 in London and 2 outside London.
And then you released the Reavoice live album.
So I would always do a duo set, and I recorded about 3 years worth of those duo sets, and then released that as an album live at Reavoice. And then those duo sets kind of ended up taking centre stage for the next festival series, Hang, which you mentioned, which I've done 3 editions of. And that was a way of sort of saying, you know, I'd like to focus on those musicians that I work with and put a bit more emphasis on those collaborations and put them in the spotlight, I guess.
Right. Okay. And then after Hang, you released your 7th album, which was a collaboration with Kate Williams and the 4+3 Ensemble. And you also worked with classical guitarist John Williams.
Kate Williams has been a long-term friend of mine. We had played together, you know, on and off for years, probably almost since the beginning of my career. But we'd never really done anything specifically collaboratively. And she had a beautiful ensemble called 4+3, which is her piano trio plus a string quartet. And they had done some gigs, and they had done a few where they also invited a guest to enhance the group. And one of them was John Williams, who happens to be Kate's dad, but they had never worked together before. And they did a set of music, and then she asked me if I would also like to be a guest. And we decided that we kind of thought we should push ourselves with this project and go into maybe areas that we hadn't explored so much individually as artists, and just try and see if we could create, you know, new things. I think especially from songbook onwards, I've become very interested in writing much more than ever before. So we wrote quite a lot of original material together. And John plays on a couple of tracks. One piece that Kate actually wrote for him, that I asked if I could put lyrics to, that then became part of a trilogy documenting true stories from child refugees in this most recent refugee crisis. So each part of it has kind of led to something bigger, I think, than where we initially imagined it would start. And it's been an absolutely amazing project to tour, especially with that lush soundscape and the string quartet, who she's really arranged in a way that they are as important as anyone else in the band. It's not a string quartet grafted on for sonic effect or, you know, padding or background. They're really integral to the whole sound.
It's a beautiful album.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very proud of it, actually.
Georgia, thank you for joining us. It's been absolutely lovely. We look forward to seeing you at some gigs when we're out of lockdown.
Hope so very much, and all stay safe and well.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks for the next in our lockdown series. But in the meantime, we're going to leave you now with Georgia Mancio playing us out with The Last Goodbye.
I passed by the house just today. It seemed to have something to say. The gates were all worn and the pathway was torn, and yet I still hoped you'd be there. The lights that you hung from the tree, the flowers you planted for me, the shoes that you wore, they were right by the door, and so I still hoped you'd be there. Though time slept through our hands, life seemed so planned, I thought you'd be here always. Now that I'm standing alone, I see it's a house, not home. Goodbye, my old friend, I won't pass by again, still hoping that I'll find you there. I passed by the house just today. It seemed to have something to say. The gates were all worn and the pathway was torn, and yet I still hoped you'd be there. The lights that you hung from the tree, the flowers you planted for me, the shoes that you wore, they were right by the door, and so I still hope you'd be there. Though time slept through our hands, life seemed so bland, I thought you'd be here always. Now me it's a house, not a home. Goodbye, my old friend, I won't pass by again. Still hoping that I'll find you there. Still hoping I'll find you there. Still hoping. Still hoping.